Just to let you know, I come from a Salesforce Platform background. I used to be the PM for things like Lightning Components and Visualforce, and internally something we call Aura that you've probably seen in various places. And I spent 2.5 years working on the platform before going into analytics. And since joining the analytics team, my role has been that of making sure we do all the great things that bring the platform to analytics and vice versa. So things like SDKs and APIs and packaging and licensing. So I spend a lot more time on the platform than you might believe. I'm not really a data scientist, data analyst, BI type person. So I think and I live, eat, and breathe platform, as they like to say. Well, it was working. I'll wave my hands again. So the voice thing has come up quite a bit in the past couple of years. I'm sure many of you either have an Alexa or have played with one, or you have maybe a Google Home device. You certainly have seen things like the Google Assist on Android and things like the Apple Siri and that kind of thing. We've all experienced them. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about some things there that relate to the platform. Before I go too much further, let me show you the lovely forward-looking statements. What I still think of as safe harbor, but I'm told that means a different thing these days. So we have to say forward-looking statements. If I talk about some product features today, don't use those for your purchasing decisions. If you've been to any Salesforce presentations in the past few years, you're no doubt familiar with this. But I'm not going to talk a lot about platform-specific features and product features. It's mostly about some other integration type things. But just keep that in mind. That's our legal cover. And I'm going to start off with a demo. Everybody likes this. And I've got lots of slides with lots of detail. But I'm going to go through and actually show you things in the product, both on Amazon and on Salesforce. And we'll talk through code and that kind of thing and show you how these things fit together. So to set things up, we were working with Amazon in the past few months on various partnerships. Two companies that work together in various capacities. Amazon's actually a big user of Salesforce. Something that may not be apparent, but they use it for all of their salespeople, and they do CRM. I don't know how many people they have using it, but it's pretty significant. And they've obviously been working on the Alexa devices, and it's now sort of a war to own the voice, as people say. In fact, Salesforce itself wants to be part of that, and who controls the voice, the transcript, all the various things inside there. And we looked at it and said, well, obviously there'll be lots of these Echo devices. And I use Echo and Alexa interchangeably, but the devices are officially Echo, the services Alexa, and that kind of thing. And Amazon is planning to go big into the business world. They had this thing called Alexa for Business. They were launching at AWS reInvent in November. And they said, hey, we're trying to find some good business partners to work on this. Most of our requests for Alexa business use is Salesforce. In fact, they said we're by far the biggest thing. I'm going to mute her for a second because she'll keep trying to respond. And they said, hey, can you guys build a cool demo? We're going to launch this thing. You can't talk about it. They had a code name for it and everything. But can you build a demo? And so within the company, people were asked, hey, who can work on this? And analytics is something people like to see and work with because it's very visual, has lots of data. There's things like Einstein Analytics, Einstein Discovery. And they approached my managers and said, hey, can you guys help us out with some demo stuff? And they also know that I love the platform. They said, hey, do you want to get involved with this? And I said, oh, sure. So first I thought, this will be very simple. We'll take some little Alexa type stuff, hook it up and go. But it became a bit of an obsession between myself and a guy named Jonathan Bruce. And every night after my son went to bed, I sat down and started coding again. So I would spend 3 to 4, maybe 5 hours working on this thing. So in the course of 3 or 4 weeks, we built the demo that you're going to see today. And the funny thing is we come at it from a very different perspective than most of Amazon's business partners. They had some pretty cool partners, big names, but they were all doing what we think of as fairly simple stuff. In fact, their scenarios are things like, I'm going to check into my hotel room and I'm going to ask a room service for something. And I'm going to order room service. Then I'm going to send an alarm to wake me up at 6:30 for my meeting next day. And that was kind of their demos. And I thought, well, that's not really business centric. That's a kind of extension of what you do with the Alexa for Home. So we said, let's go full on and integrate Salesforce into this thing. And we've had various Salesforce integrations over the years. You've seen demos with voice and that kind of thing. But we also said, let's use the platform fully. Let's use things like APIs. Let's make sure that everything we do works really well and that we can track this thing and build out something that we think of as being very platform-centric. You've all seen things like mobile, obviously web, more recently things like IoT that get started up, and there's all sorts of initiatives going on, and people tend to build solutions and forget about the platform. And then we spend the next 2 or 3 years trying to go back and platformize, to use a crazy word, but we try to make it platform-centric. So we said, hey, let's start with everything we learned and make this a platform play from the start. So without further ado, let's see if we can get Alexa to cooperate. Now, one thing you'll see here is that I've got a little screen that shows it, and the lighting is going to have to be adjusted. These screens on these little devices, which is an Echo Show, is about the most high gloss thing I've ever seen. And I don't know why they would build it like that, but it needs a little glare protector. But we'll try to get it so that it doesn't show a huge reflection. So this is a Echo Show, but it's the same basic core technology. I've even got an Echo Dot, the little tiny one. And basically these things are glorified Bluetooth speakers. And Amazon is pushing them out there, as is Google and others, as commodities, because they want you to have these all over the place. And they're selling them probably at close to a loss, because inside of this thing has some massive speakers. In fact, it weighs so much that it makes my laptop bag feel twice as heavy. But it doesn't have a battery. It's just giant speakers and so forth inside there. And it's got directional mics and so forth. Pretty cool device. And you can imagine these things being in conference rooms. So let's bring up a browser as well, and I'll show you how we integrated all this stuff. Let's see. So this is a service console running inside of Lightning Experience. This shows the rough demo architecture. And what we're going to do is we're going to drive this display with the Echo device. So we'll put the two kind of side by side. So Alexa, open Salesforce reInvent. Alexa, open Salesforce reInvent.
Welcome to Salesforce.
Alexa, list analytics dashboards.
Einstein Analytics found these dashboards.
Alexa, show dashboard 1.
Dashboard, welcome dashboard.
So Alexa, list analytics dashboards.
Einstein Analytics found these dashboard leaderboard.
So as you can see here, you can do voice or touch. And basically behind the scenes,
Try asking. Select opportunity type as new business.
So behind the scenes, the voice part is going to return to you the kind of the verb and the nouns. And you don't get back the full transcript, and that bothers some people. In fact, it bothers Salesforce because we want to own all the data. But Amazon is doing this very efficiently in that they're basically processing it in the Alexa/Lex service. And they give you back a verb of sorts that says, do something. And they say, here are some nouns and so forth. Here's some things the user said. But it's not the full voice transcript. It's oftentimes what they call slots and intents and that sort of thing. So you take those things and translate that into a command, which in Salesforce typically maps to like a REST API, or in some cases, maybe calling out to a REST API backed by Apex. So you can do some transforms on the data and that sort of thing. And you can choose where to put the logic. It could be heavily in Amazon, on top of things like AWS Lambda, which you'll see a bit of here in a second. Or it could be in Salesforce, in Apex, for example. And internally, we'll probably do things inside of Salesforce because we use Java, and we'll do some cool transforms there. But you can choose where to put your logic. A lot of people like to do things on Heroku. Because we were doing this big launch with Amazon, I did most of it on Lambda. It's a serverless architecture. I can tell you that's about the craziest thing I've ever seen. It drives you absolutely bonkers trying to figure out how to pass things between there. And if you've ever dealt with Visualforce view state, pretty much the same thing. Just imagine view state being very, very tiny, because if your code and your state go beyond a certain point, you blow it out and you have to go do something else. So I'm not a big fan of serverless, as you can probably tell. You end up having to use using various databases and that kind of stuff to kind of pass things along. So cool, but not necessarily my biggest, not the biggest productivity boost. But it's still basically Node.js there, so you're dealing in JavaScript. These devices deal mostly with JSON these days. Some devices have a markup language. Things like the Apple devices have, like the Apple TV has TVML, which is more of an XML format. But you're basically transforming Salesforce data into something on the screen. And then you're transforming those inputs, whether it's the touch, which is typically like an index into a list, or a word or a couple of words, which are a lookup into that list, and you're calling the REST APIs. And that's really what it is. It's still request response processing. I tell people we're still doing basically green screen stuff. We have fancier and fancier interfaces, but it's the same old thing. The user does something, process it, send something back. So these are really no different. There's not really an AI here. People talk about these things as being assistants and learning, but the base technology is actually not very smart. In fact, the voice processing is kind of sketchy. As you'll see, it doesn't always get things right, especially things like names. But let's go a little further. Alexa, open Salesforce reInvent.
Welcome to Salesforce.
Alexa, show my contacts.
I found these contacts in my contacts. Francis Pinder, Jean-Michel Mougeot.
So you
Jerry
watch
Wagner,
the list back behind here is going to update, because I'm basically telling it what list I want to show. And that's the standard Salesforce list.
Rad Rudkova, Simon Goodyear, Skip Sauls,
Alexa,
and Todd Hay.
show contact Simon Goodyear. Cross my fingers.
Showing full name is Simon Goodyear. Twitter is at Simon Goodyear. LC Allen is true. Lead source is undefined. Try.
So when you see this, this is not actually an HTML page. This is not rendered by Lightning, Visualforce, etc. And we've actually asked Amazon to give us access to the browser, because this thing has a browser. In fact, when you log into any kind of Wi-Fi spot, it pops open the web page just like you'd expect. And it's pretty much like an Android device in here. It's got CPU, memory, screen, so forth. It's not running Android outright, I don't think. It's some kind of specialized thing, probably similar to their Kindle devices and so forth. But they don't give you access to that browser. So we can't render these things in Lightning, Visualforce, etc. So that hobbles you to a certain degree. You're saying, well, how in the heck do I get it on there? Well, they have a thing called a display template, and they have obviously the voice. It's like SSML, which is a markup language. So they give you all the tools you need to do to put the things on the device or to spell it out. In fact, you can, for voice, you can put in pauses. You can tell it to enunciate something. You can slow things down, speed things up. So you have a lot of control over it. And you can say, based upon the type of data, do something else. If you want to, you could say, use a certain pattern for email addresses. Like Salesforce oftentimes has first name, initial, last name. So you could read out the first initial, last name for certain patterns and that kind of thing. Otherwise, you end up with kind of funny things it reads out. Now, on that display we saw there, that's actually driven by a compact layout. And I chose that just because it's out of the box, ready to go, and something I can play with. The cool thing is this lets the Salesforce administrator change what's being shown on the screen. And that's significant because we're not going to hard code these things. We're going to say use Salesforce in the proper way, use the metadata where possible, and give the admin the control over what actually happens when you show something. Now, when we say something right now, we don't really have a UI for that, but behind the scenes, you could easily put in something that says, show a template of sorts of what you want to say, and let the administrator adjust that at the Salesforce side and send that to Amazon or to Google, et cetera. So imagine a future platform for this sort of thing where By default, Salesforce says, here are the things it's going to say when it reads something, takes some action. But the admin can override that and say, for my org, I want it to say this thing, change it. Or for the user. So we could customize it and personalize it. And that's significant because not everybody interacts in the same way when they're using voice especially. And I think voice is only going to succeed if it adapts to you, to the users, not if we force everybody to learn a certain way to talk to it. And right now it's sort of, we have to say it in a certain way. In fact, I have to enunciate things. I'm from Mississippi in the South in the US, so I have a drawl. You may not recognize that if you're from Europe, but people in the US, I immediately, oh, he's from the South, because I talk real slow, kind of like that. But I have to enunciate things. And when I lived here in London back in 2000, I know there was classes to teach people how to speak with proper enunciation and stuff. They would advertise these things and say, you can get a better job if you take these classes and learn to speak in this particular way, especially working in London. So these devices are somewhat particular, but I think over time they'll adapt to that as well. So if we wanted to, we could go into the contact, and you'll see here the compact layout. Let's pick this, and you can see exactly what we saw on the screen here in these fields. And let's pick one like email and put it over here. And not everybody has email, but let's put the Twitter thing higher. And the LC alum is the London Calling alumni flag. And I went through late last night after the party here, I went through and added several of the organizers and other people I've worked with this week. And I put their names in as well, but it still doesn't quite pick up everything. But now if we do it, say, Alexa, open Salesforce reInvent.
Welcome to Salesforce.
Alexa, show my contacts.
I found these contacts in my contacts.
Alexa, show contact Simon Goodyear.
Showing full name is Simon Goodyear. LC alum is true. Twitter is at Simon Goodyear.
So you see here now we've changed, oops, sorry, I didn't realize that was on the screen. So we've now changed the order inside here using the Salesforce metadata, using a compact layout. So this is just one example, but this is the kind of thing that we want to build in and make sure that our admins have full control over this voice experience. So imagine, other editors, other layouts or voice templates and that kind of thing. And I've got some internal things I've been working on which actually would give you a cool transformation engine with rules that say, take the input from the device, do something, take the output from Salesforce and transform it back for the device, and not make you worry so much as, is it Alexa or is it a Google display or something else? And I give you that common feature there. So a couple more quick demo pieces. Alexa, open Salesforce reInvent.
Welcome to Salesforce.
Alexa, show my cases.
I found these cases in my open cases. Phone shattered. Wi-Fi is slow. Often can't connect.
Well, that's really blurry.
Case about tablets.
Alexa,
Case about
show case 1.
Showing case number is 000-18902. Subject is phone shattered.
Alexa, set case priority to high.
Showing case number is 000-18902.
Alexa,
Subject is
set case priority to high.
Showing case number is 000-18902. Subject is phone shattered.
So this is actually high, not high. So it's red now. So the colors here, I pick a different template and say show red, green, or yellow for medium. And Alexa, set case status to working.
Showing case number is 000-18902. Subject is
And you
phone
should see it
shattered.
reflected over here as well.
Example iPhone 10.
Alexa,
64.
suggest replacement products.
I found this Apple iPhone 10, fully unlocked 5.8 inches, 64 gigabytes. Silver on
Alexa,
Amazon.
send suggested replacement.
Showing case number is 000-18902. Subject is phone shattered.
Alexa, refresh case.
Showing case number is 000189002. Subject
So I
is
don't
phone
know if you
sharing.
caught that, but it went from working to closed because what I did there is I kicked off a workflow built-in process builder, and that actually goes off and sends an email to the user saying, we found this product, here's a link to the Amazon page, you can click here and order it. So I used the Amazon partner API, and I said, I've got this device, give me suggested replacements, and it finds an iPhone 10, and it gives you back the ASIN, which shows up on that other screen, which is the Amazon number. So you can take that, send that into email, generate the email, and say, here's the link to Amazon, click here and order it. Now, it turns out you can't automatically order stuff from an API with Amazon. That's a big no-no. And that's probably for good reason, but that was what I originally thought I could do. I thought, oh, APIs are everywhere, but they don't allow that. They're not really big on people doing it automatically. So we used our Visualforce templates to generate an email, send it out. And in my inbox now is a really ugly email because I haven't spent any time formatting that. But you can imagine a service person working and dealing with the voice and doing things without having to get online and typing everything. So that's just a few little kind of happy path examples, but it shows the potential for what goes on there. Now, one more quick thing here. Alexa, open Salesforce reInvent.
Welcome to Salesforce.
Alexa, show recent Quip docs.
I found these recent items in Quip.
Alexa, show Quip Doc 1.
I found these recent items in Quip.
Alexa, show Quip Doc 2. Come on. There we go.
I found these recent items in Quip.
Now, Quip is a fairly recent acquisition. It doesn't have a full API like we would expect, but it does have kind of a machine-to-machine API. So I took advantage of that and got what I could out of it. But the vision is with full APIs, you could actually create new documents and so forth. And one of the things people talk about is, I want to create a note. So take a note after a meeting, take a note during a meeting, put it into Quip, and then analyze that in some way. Use the so-called AI aspects of it and say, look at that and figure out what the user actually meant there. So that's kind of the vision where these things will go. And eventually you want the device to do things for you. Do the Einstein part of it, which is simply, understand my business, understand my day, understand what I'm trying to do, and help me through that. Be a true assistant there, not so much a just command parser. So that's kind of where we're thinking about these things. I think about it from the platform side and saying basically let's not lose sight of everything. And this is some logging that I've been working on, because what you find is these devices have a voice ID. Google calls it voice something or other, but it's basically an ID for who that person is. And I've got it turned on here. And so Alexa, who am I? Well, Alexa, who am I?
I'm talking to Skip. This is Skip's account.
So when you set up Voice ID, you basically train the device. And you'll find that devices like this give you back a reasonable confidence level, which you can see reflected in this report, which is showing up as a 4, sometimes a 3. Now, an Echo Dot has a much smaller set of microphones and much more primitive. And the price is, $30 versus $200. So it doesn't give you back the same degree of confidence all the time. And so what Amazon is doing is they're giving us back this number, which is between, I think, 0 and 7. And it tells you what the confidence level is that that is the person doing it. So why is that significant? Well, when you have Salesforce open and you're interacting with it and you're working on something, you don't want somebody else in the room yelling out, delete record or something like that, and all of a sudden your work is gone, and it probably wouldn't happen, but you never know. So the confidence level, which, I'm not sure what Google will have, Apple will have, but they all have those notions coming in. But we would map that into something that the admin can choose to say what is allowable. And you see this all over Salesforce. You can say, you can do certain things, you can share certain things, you can see certain things. So imagine based upon the object and the role and this confidence level saying, this user can see these things with a voice confidence of 4 in this case. But to take action on it, we require at least a 6. And it may be that these devices aren't going to be good enough to do that for real security. It remains to be seen whether or not they can do so. They claim they're going to keep improving it because a lot of it's in the service, not the device. But there are some limits on these things as to what they can handle in terms of what they're doing, because they're sending up a compressed audio signal. You know, they're trying to send it to the cloud very quickly, process it. It's probably not as accurate as it would be if you had it in your browser or even on your mobile phone. So we'll see where all that goes. From my perspective, I think we should be logging all this, making sure that we know this. So this log shows things like, you know, what device it is. If you hover over it, you can see what Amazon is sending us. So Amazon sends us a payload that includes all of this context. So what is the intent? You know, what did they try to do? What are the capabilities, and so forth. And you can imagine on the Salesforce side, we can now map this into how we handle that interaction. So that's the important thing. It's not the voice so much as making sure that we can actually take what they're sending and make some sense of it, and importantly, make sure it's secure. Now, people ask about authorization. Amazon wants you to authorize things through their device and connect to Salesforce. The Salesforce identity team said, no, 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 no. We want you to log into Salesforce. So what I've done here is use the what's called device OAuth. And you've seen this before when you go to like an Apple TV or a Roku device or a smart TV, and it says go to a browser and type in this code, and then you can log into the service for Netflix and that kind of thing. You've probably seen this kind of thing. So that's what we've done here. So if I say log into Salesforce, it shows me the code. I log into my browser, log into my org, then I say confirm session, and it does a key exchange and gets back the OAuth tokens and refresh tokens and that kind of thing. It works really well because I logged in November, and I didn't log back out until late January, and it all works correctly well, the refresh and that kind of thing. So, any questions on this so far? How are we doing on time? Just a few minutes, huh? Does anyone know what the time is? Is it 8 minutes left? 8 minutes left, okay. So I'm not going to go through every single slide, obviously, but I want to show you kind of a sampler of what's there, and you can read this offline. The code I've written here in many places is POC level code. I can share bits and pieces of it. I don't have a GitHub I can share with you because there's stuff that's obviously kind of messy and internal, but we can certainly show you how some of these things are done if you're interested. And this shows kind of the vision for any device, any assistant, anywhere. I don't think we should integrate with Alexa or Google or Siri or Cortana or what have you. We should integrate with voice. That should be the key thing. And then, is this an evolution or a revolution? And you see this with web and mobile. We've gone through these phases where everyone talks about certain cool new features, and then the real things sort of shake out. I think we're already going through the evolutionary phase of voice. It's actually a much faster track. And then the revolution will be making it fully conversational, making you think that there's an actual AI that's working back behind the scenes. So under the covers, this is roughly the architecture. In Amazon Lambda, we're actually processing some JavaScript that says, basically take the intent and the slots, basically the verbs and the nouns and so forth, and we're going to make some sort of call into Salesforce. And typically it's calling an API. And in most places I just use the raw REST API. In only a few cases have I had to write like an Apex front end to transform things. So I have code there in JavaScript that says take this Amazon thing and figure out what it means to map into the Salesforce world. Most of the time it's a object type and a record ID and things like that. And you can probably figure out how those things are built. And then on the Salesforce side, we process it and send it back. And again, inside of Amazon, we take it and figure out how to make the display template. Now, for a Salesforce Platform product perspective, I would propose that we do most of the conversion on platform, not on Amazon. And we're sending Amazon basically back a response in each case. And this lets us control things like the layouts and the transformations and so forth. And then inside of Amazon's tools, you have, which one's display here? You have the intents and slots. And Again, this is the select contact by name intent, and it has basically show first name, last name, and you saw that during the demo. Well, each of these maps to a type, and there's actually a set of first names that Amazon has that's fairly comprehensive, and then last names is one that I created, and I put that in and put a list in, and I can keep adding to that. So imagine taking this a little bit further and saying, instead of using the generic first name and last name, just take all the names out of your org, all your contacts, users, et cetera, and use that as the data source for it. And then this is what you get back from an intent. So this is in the on the Amazon side. And you can see here now that it has the last name, Bruce, first name, Jonathan, and then it tells you some things about how successful it was. Most of the time you get back a reasonable match. I don't know what happened, but suddenly yesterday it started saying Jonathan Cruz every time I said Jonathan Bruce. And I'm like, I know I'm saying Bruce, I'm enunciating it. But I did change my location to be London instead of San Francisco. So maybe there's some kind of localization thing, but it suddenly flipped around on me. And then you have a handler that basically says, when it's that thing, pass in those variables, and then you write some code. This is actually a much bigger function. I've cut this down to kind of show it off, but you can see here basically I'm figuring out the record IDs from a list. So that list comes back and it has first name, last name, email, whatever's in the list there. This basically maps to that. And then showing the record, we'll come back to that. So I wrapped this with a REST request so I could do my logging. In this case, I'm actually proxying it through Apex, doing the logging. In a real platform situation, we wouldn't have to do that. We would have somebody write it on the Java side, logging it to Splunk or something. But this is just to kind of prove out the technology. And then this is my Alexa proxy, which basically just says take that request, take all the intents and all the stuff I sent it, log it, and then call the actual REST API. And you can see here's just some basic logging type stuff. Nothing really amazing here. It just gives me a way to keep track of all the events. Now, when you get things back, you've got to figure out how to put it into the right form. And the display templates, I know this is a bit of an eye chart here, but it's a very well-formed thing. There's several different types. There's lists, there's cards. They have like 5 or 6 kind of out-of-the-box ones. They say they'll have more. And these will map into various devices. And what you do here is you put in what are the images, what is the text, and that sort of thing. So it's very straightforward. You basically have to map it into that. Now, fast forward a bit, this is the kind of thing we would probably generate on the Salesforce side and generate it from the metadata, so all the layouts and that kind of thing. Right now what I do is I take the response and I take the describe and I iterate through it and build up this card, as you can imagine. So not hard, but sort of tedious. And you get this sort of thing here. And then on Amazon, I used quite a bit of their features here. And this is the Alexa for Business thing, basically saying, what can you do here? Personal and shared devices, you can provision devices. You can say for your company, say all the conference rooms have Alexas and you don't have to log into each one. And that's a big deal because then you're using that voice ID and you can go into a meeting room and say, start my meeting, and not have to say log in, et cetera, et cetera. And then they do the voice profiles we've seen, and then you can do private skills as well as the ones on the store. And then on Salesforce, I used a lot of things, but to highlight a couple things, I love Lightning. I used to be the Lightning PM, and I love platform events. I think platform events are one of the coolest things around. So when you saw all those things being driven on the screen, what happens is I actually fire off a REST API call that says create a platform event with a payload. Salesforce then sends it into things like workflows, process builder, and we can listen to it from Lightning, and we can take that event and say, show something. For those of you who go to the Lightning training today, ask the instructor to teach you about Lightning events because that's the way you can control the world. They're very cool. And especially things like Service Console adds a lot of really neat things there. So well worth learning how to do Lightning events. That's a key to making Lightning successful. And again, this is the creating the event on the Amazon side. And then this is my platform event. This came out of analytics, so I called it the Einstein Analytics event, but it's really a generic event. And then this is my utility bar component that listens for and basically says make all these things happen. So as the events come in. It does other events. It opens up things using the service console and basically causes all the magic to happen. And this is just one way to do it, but that utility bar is a neat way to have things that span across. Check out the trailheads. There's actually some on Alexa. I didn't write those. They're a little different than this today, but they're a great way to learn. And then Amazon's got a bunch of great resources, but their world is very different from ours. It's much lower level. It's much more the open source type world. It's cool, but just keep in mind it's a little different sometimes. Please come to Trailhead DX and Dreamforce. I think you'll see a lot of voice by Dreamforce, maybe a little bits of it here at Trailhead DX. And then we'll show you more over time as we build these things out. And finally, I want to say thank you, and I'll be available for questions after the event. I think we're pretty close to being on time, right on the money. So again, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to talking to you during the rest of the event. Thank you.